happy to see a lot of good friends in the evening today. So thanks to Sigma. So today's session is being supported by Sigma. So it is a Sigma day today. And I'm so happy to have my friend Rami, because and many other familiar faces, like when we go into rooftops or when we have our photo talks, we meet all of you and some new faces as well. So for the new faces, I just want to just give 1 minute of introduction of what exactly is iBrandConnect. So we call Leo Photo, HNY filters, YC Union, Shimoda up bags, toolbox, and 360-degree spinnies. And at the same time, we buy a lot of any of MK Trading's products as well. So as good as we are very close partners, and Ravi is always a call away. I just want to just like Ravi-san, can you just have a little bit brief about all of them? He knows you, but still some of them. Yeah.
Good evening, Ramadan and Kareem. My name is Ravi from MK Trading Company LLC. We are the distributor of Sigma lenses in India. And this year we have launched a number of new lenses, especially for Sonimo. And many of us are already using Sigma lenses, out of which 50 mm 1.4 and 60-600 are already popular. And very soon we are going to launch new lenses for Nikon Z-mount. These are the three lenses. This is actually crop sensor lenses, 30 mm, 56 mm, and 16 mm. And very soon, Sigma is going to launch few lenses for full frame cameras. So let me introduce our mentor today, Mr. Rami. And he's a professional photographer, videographer, and a big fan of Sigma. So please, big round of applause for thank you.
Thank you and enjoy. Rami, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please follow iBrandConnect. So you can see a lot of activities happening throughout the year. So always connect with the brand and
So thank you everyone for coming and making it here today. I'm really happy to share some of my process for moon photography. Moon photography is a bit of a niche. Not everybody's doing it. But in the Arabian region, it's magical. And the reason being, the moon is, when it's rising, when it's a full moon, it's rising with the sunset. And the colors and the brightness of the moon is exceptional compared to any other place in the world. And that's one of the reasons I really love this type of photography, along with other things that I do as well. So about me, just briefly, in case you're wondering, I'm 37 years old. I'm doing photography for, professionally, I would say, for the last 8 years. And I've been traveling, doing photos since 2010. I live in Dubai for the last 15 years. I'm not originally from Dubai, so I'm Lebanese, in case you're wondering. I moved here for work. It's not my prime, photography is, I would say, is my second job that I really love and get me going in life. I'm also married and I have 2 kids. So I will share a couple of photos that I've captured over the last couple of years, so you have an idea about my style and what you expect from the course. I'm also open to any questions, so whenever you have a question, you can let me know and I will stop. I can explain more. I have backup slides, so please feel free home and let me know if you have any questions. So I'll start with some of the photos that I captured. This one is in Maliha. It's a desert in Sharjah, which is around an hour. And the idea here was to have a model with the moon. So we planned this accordingly, and we waited for the full moon. It has a lot of story behind it. It was also featured on CNN Arabic because of the whole story, how we captured it. I have some time-lapse that we capture at the same time. So just to give you an idea on the real action, what's going on. This is a different type of photos of the moon. This is during the blood moon. and it happens very rarely. So this one was a couple of years back where we were very lucky to see it from the UAE. And you can see the different phases from being completely red to phasing toward the normal moon. This. As you can see, I like to always include subjects in my photos. So whether it's a building, it's a person. Here's famous Burj Khalifa, but I also tweaked it a bit. This specific event is happening, laser show. They had it in January, February, and March last year. And I was so curious to capture the moon aligned with that specific time. And it takes a lot of planning to really catch the right moment when it aligns. Luckily, I was able to see the moon. It was a very cloudy day, but ended up with something very special. All right, this is also with Burj Khalifa moonrise, taken from Palm Jumeirah, Burj Al Arab, and some other buildings. So I like to find interesting structures of towers, and that gives a bit of mood to the picture. I'm doing a lot of reels, so this is like one of the reels that I did for Instagram. So I capture them as a time lapse, and then I take few photos and I post them as well as photos. This is ISS, so that is slowed down 4 times. The whole process is around 0.7 seconds, and I had to get basically 4K 120, slow it down to be able to see it moving like that. So this is the ISS International Space Station. And it's also very, very, very specific event that happens maybe, I don't know, every 3 months, maybe you can align it somewhere. These are some other photos that I took a year to capture it.
So the lens is always a Sigma.
Majority of, so this Sigma lens that I've been using, and I will go through all my gears in a minute. That's a pretty new lens, so I did capture a couple of photos with this one as well. This is a 60 to 600.
60 to
Yeah. So it gives you like really good versatile kind of. But I've been capturing moons for a long time, so some of the photos might not be specifically with this lens. So this is my process that I would like to introduce to you, so you understand what are the things you need to do to be able to capture these kind of images. It's not just a point and shoot kind of situation. It's a well-planned kind of photos, because the moon does rise in a specific time. It is full in a very specific day, and then you have to plan the angle and everything. So I'll go through this process. So first of all, you need to understand what kind of moon you want to shoot. Is it a full moon? Is it half moon? Is it quarter? So that is something you, as an artist, need to decide what you want. It might be that you just want to go out and you choose the moon that is today. That also is a possibility. Then you have to find the location and the composition. That's up to you as an artist. I'll tell you my process. Then there is the weather. The weather has a lot to do with your images. And there are 3 main factors that I will talk about: wind, cloud, and humidity. Then I'll introduce some of my lenses and gears and give you some ideas on what you will need to capture these images. I use some apps that help me plan my trips and my position of the moon. That also, I will have a very brief summary on what they are, and I'm open to answer any questions. And then the 2 days that are next to the full moon are usually considered full moons, so 7th and 5th. So you'll have 3 days in a month that are considered as full moon. And then you will go through the other phases. So one in gibbous is one of them, from 17 to 12. Of course, this is a representation, but it does grow smaller or bigger depending on every day that it goes. And then you have the full moon, or the new moon. Now it's important to understand that these timings of the rise of the moon are different. So the moon doesn't rise at the same time every day. For instance, yesterday the moon rise was around 7 o'clock in the evening. The day before that, it was around 6 o'clock. The day before that, it was around 5 o'clock in the evening. So it keeps moving as the days go. And it does repeat itself in a certain pattern. And there are so many apps that tell you exactly when it's going to rise, what time it's going to set, where it's going to be at which angle. So I don't want to go too much into details, but you need to understand that the moon is a moving subject that you need to track and understand. These are some of the ways I find my composition. So I realized how I want to. In that middle shot, it was a yoga teacher. And I was like, let's do one shot with the moon. Why not? And we planned that 3 months in advance. And we waited for the right moment. And we're able to capture a really beautiful shot. Other ways of inspiration would be social media, something you see in a magazine. Like this Burj Khalifa shot, I'm pretty sure you've seen it a lot of times. It was probably also how it inspired me. And when you go and execute your own shot, you will always have your own way of showing it. So don't be thinking like, okay, you're copying or anything. No, you're just inspired. You're all inspired at some point to create. And you always add your touch to your photos. The last one is more of a curiosity. So I would say if you have an idea in mind and you are doubting if it can be done, then try, do your research, and it could happen. And on this specific case, although this is a very low altitude, and the moon, when it's rising at it's a bit invisible when it rises. But I waited for the right moment, and I was able to capture this specific image. All right, so now we'll move to the things that are related to the weather. And from my experience, what I can tell my car where the wind is coming, open the doors, block the wind from all the sides, put my tripod, and avoid having any shake on my camera. So that's one thing. Other thing is you want to watch for the weather. So if it's very cloudy, the more you look at the horizon, the more the clouds are dense, and you won't see the moon. And here we're targeting really low angle shots because we want to align it with buildings, with these kind of things. So that's a very important factor. This specific photo, there was a lot of clouds. Luckily, I was able to see it at the end, but yeah, you could end up with not seeing the moon at all in some cases. The third one is very common, I would say, because we live in Dubai and it's a desert and it's humid. So there's a lot of humidity. There's a sand focal length. So pretty sure you know a bit about cameras. Even if you don't own a camera, you probably use a phone. For example, the iPhone has 3 lenses. One is 12 millimeter, one is 24, and one is 65, I think. So for the camera, you can choose and pick. There's plenty of lenses that you can choose. This one is a 60 to 600, so it does all the focal lengths. Here's a representation of how big the moon will look in your shot on a full frame body. So the difference between a full frame and APS-C, of course, its sensor is a bit bigger. If you do the same on an APS-C, you will see it a bit larger for the same focal length. So this is on a the full focal range that I want. This is the specific lens that I've been using. The beauty about this lens is you can zoom out to 60 millimeter, so capture the first image, and zoom in all the way to 600. That's the as shot. And here was a bit of crop. So it gives you that flexibility to get almost every situation. This specific image was captured during sunset. So the sun was setting as the moon was rising. And that's why you got this very nice colors on Burj Khalifa. Any questions so far? I've gone through many things, but we can keep the question at the end, or if you have any questions now, I can also address them. So please feel free or raise your hand. This is my gear that I'm using. I have two setups every time I go shooting. Most of the time I use both of them. So one would be for the time lapse. So I'm capturing a series of images that I will combine into a video. That's one. And my second camera will be for more still photos. If I want to move around, I find it a bit different composition, or I find that it's not aligning perfectly, then I have this flexibility to move. And the reason I use this specific gear, I've learned it through time. I had a very small tripod in the beginning, and lenses, I use two lenses. So the 6600, which is very versatile and one of my favorite. And then I have my other Sony as well. Two bodies. One is more for video oriented, which is an S3. So if I want to capture a video or time lapse, I use that. And the R4 is a 61 megapixel sensor. So the point of 61 megapixel, probably that I should explain a bit. I do crop my images because a lot of times you are constrained by the focal length. So 600 might be a bit too wide, and you want to focus more on the moon. So for that, even if I go to an APS-C mode from 61 megapixel, I can still have a 26 megapixel image, more than enough for a big print. Okay. Whereas if you start with a 20 megapixel camera and then you crop, you might end up with a 3 megapixel image, not printable. So you have to always keep this in mind. All right. Yeah, you might want to note down the name of the of this app. It's a phone app. It's called Photopills. What it does, let me show you. Maybe I can share a demo later on with that. So here I put a black pin where my subject is. In this case, I think it was Burj Khalifa. And here I was on the World Island. Okay. So for that specific day and time, and that's how I captured the moon crossing Burj Khalifa. I've gone through a learning process with Photopills, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or help that you have. Okay. The other thing that I do, so that is very good for planning. You can plan it from your bed before you sleep, and you can say, okay, I'm gonna go on that day, shoot Burj Khalifa. But there are so many other things that you need to take into consideration. You could go to that location and have a wall constructed. You could realize that there's not a road that can reach that location, actually. It's completely closed. So these are things you need to also do your own homework and check how you're gonna reach it, how does the view look from that location. For that, I use Google Maps. I do search on people's images that they've taken from that specific location. Street view, if you ever did 360 view from the street, that's a way to also do it. If you double click on the road on Google Maps, you can actually go into 360 view and you can see what's happening there. If it's a remote place, it's more difficult, of course, but that's what I'm trying to explain. Like that location, I went there, and then I realized that this building is actually blocking the second one. I still took the shot because it was an amazing moonrise. But if I knew, maybe I'd have come a day before and it would have been better because the angle would be different. In this specific shot, that is actually the behind the scene. So all the villas are actually covering the tower. So we had to get a high point to get the tip of that building. That's another thing that real life scenarios you might face. You might have trees. Yesterday I was in a place where it was plenty of trees. I couldn't move, so I had to move. I had to frame between the trees or more. What happens is it gets darker as you do that. And this is the interesting thing that you need to see. It's 1/25 of a second. If you've read any book, they will tell you always shoot the focal lengths over half. But for moonshots, you will have to go with very low shutter speed. It's very dark situations. So that's another reason why any small movement will affect your image. This is another example with Spider-Man, and this is shot at over 100 of a second. Now you will see that I'm gonna use different settings for each images. That's depending on the light that I had at that time, because the moon is rising at different time. And then in this case, there was a lot of wind. So if I did shoot at this speed, it would be shaky. So I had to go up, and while going up, I went up on my ISO as well. You can see the image cropped still looks very good from a 61 megapixel. So another example there, this is shot at 342 millimeter. So you can still get good shots even if you don't have a very, very long lens. And when I cropped it, of course, it's much less megapixel in this case because I did a heavy crop on it. But you can see the details. And it's shot at 1 second. So imagine, even, I mean, I'm surprised the moon was sharp in this one because usually the moon moves. And if you go like 2-3 seconds, it will be blurry. I think in this specific shot, I was a bit lucky because the lens to electronic shutter. Because even that shutter press shakes the image. So I always do with a timer. If I'm shooting one shot, for example, I'll put a timer of 5 seconds. So the lens will completely stabilize. And then when it's taking the photo, it's electronic, so there's no movement. That's how I get my sharpest shots.
So it is getting off automatically.
The old technology was a bit different, but the new technology is good. Go ahead. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Any other questions that you have? Yeah.
When you use that one forward, 25 and all,
Yeah.
the moon is moving fast, right?
Yeah.
How can you test? Freeze that.
Yeah. So 1/25 is okay. If you go to half a second, 1 second, that's when you should start getting worried. That's when you will see a movement. You will physically see it. The way it works, I mean, if I was shooting 600 1 second, it will be definitely different. If you up to 125, up to at 600, I've shot up to 115, it was okay. Like very sharp. If you go lower, you run the risk of being a bit blurry on the moon, like a small movement. If you want it tack sharp, then yes, go up as much as you can. The limitation here is your aperture, one. If you have a f6.3 lens, you're already very dark. Everything's dark. If you're shooting with a prime, f4, you might get more light, so you can go up a bit on the shutter speed and compensate for that. Everything is sharp. So everything beyond that point is sharp. If my hyperfocal distance was here, that means if I focus on the bush, this will be blurry. If I focus on that, this might be blurry. That's what it means. So I really want my hyperfocal distance to be before the subject and the moon. So everything is in focus. Okay? And that's not, a big deal because you can find this on any apps. It will tell you. At 600 millimeters, so if I extend it at the maximum, and I'm shooting at, this one has an f6.3, I need to be at 1.9 kilometers minimum or above to have everything in focus. If I am at 1 kilometer, then something will be out of focus. Got the point? And each lens will have different hyperfocus distance. So you don't have to memorize this, but whatever you're using, just check what's the hyperfocal distance at which aperture. So let's say I still have this lens, but I'm at 1.5 kilometers. So I can close the aperture to f8 and still be okay. All right. The bigger the lens, 800 will start at 3.7 kilometers, 1,206 kilometers. So the more focal, like the more focal lengths you get, the more you have to be.
More range to play with the ISO or always on the.
You could, but above, I'll start introducing so much noise that the image won't look good. So this is what ISO does to you. If I were to underexpose my image by 1.7, 2 stops, and I know that the camera can recover that shadow in post, rather than increasing my ISO. Okay? Does it answer a bit the question? Okay.
You were using 400 on Spider-Man.
Yes.
Because windy.
So let's go to 400 because that was a very challenging image.
Yeah.
So I was using not 400. I was using 600 at f6.3. I needed to be at 1.9 kilometer. I wasn't at 1.9 kilometer. It wasn't possible. Physically in the place, it wasn't possible. So that's why the moon, if you look at the image carefully, it's not very sharp. I can go back to it. Here. You can see the moon is not very, it's not very sharp. So it would have been a better choice for me to use a 400 and cut that hyperfocal distance and maybe increase it. Just started? So I need to go for another 2 hours. All right, so I have a couple of images here. I'll start with the easiest one to edit. So this is the raw file as shot. As you can see, it's 1/8 of a second. So it's a bit on the low side. And at 600 millimeter, f6.3, and I went on ISO 320 on this image. All right. I will process this. I'll show you the final image, how it looks. And this is in Lightroom. So I'm still here. All the edits were done in Lightroom here. And this was with some Photoshop included, just to clean up the image, the noise. I used some third-party softwares. So how many of you have used Lightroom, first of all? Okay. How many have not used Lightroom? Some don't know what I'm talking about because some used it, some didn't use it, some, okay. Anyway, so Lightroom, okay, that's something I forgot to mention. So all my photos, I shoot them in RAW format. I don't use JPEG because majority of the images that I shoot in dark situation require to recover the shadows and the highlights to reduce them and some other stuff to be done. So the only way to really utilize the dynamic range of that shot is to shoot it in a raw format. It can be compressed, and when you shoot it, you might not be able to recover the details of the moon. All right. The cameras and most manufacturers do very good at underexposing, at recovering the underexposed image. So you can underexpose by almost 2 stops to 3 stops and still recover it. But when you overexpose by more than 1 stop, you lose all the details and the highlights. So you want to make sure the moon, in this case, is not overexposed. And one more thing is this Jehora building itself was very bright. So I also wanted this not to be super overexposed. That's why I went a bit on the safe side on this. All right, so the first thing we will do is we'll raise a bit the exposure because I did underexpose that image. And as I do that, you'll see that the moon will get bright. So to compensate for that bright moon, I'll go down on the highlights. Okay. you know, this simple to understand. I mean, this is the shadow, so I'm going to increase a bit the shadows to show more of the buildings. The whites is mainly the bright white. So you don't want to tweak it too much because it will kill the image brightness. And but you do want to reduce it a little bit for the moon, not to be. If you reduce the exposure, yeah, of course. Now you don't see a lot of noise on this one. This is pretty clean as an image. In some other shots that I will edit later, you will see a lot of noise. Yeah, texture, don't want to go too much on it because then you'll start seeing all the noise. So we'll go to something like 10, and a bit of clarity. Dehaze is a very, I mean, if you have a lot of haze in the picture, you might want to use it a bit. So here I'll just go 3 to 4%, 5%. Increase a bit the colors. Okay. This is the main adjustment that probably every raw software will have. Now we will go into a bit more of advanced stuff. So on top of what I did earlier, we can still work on the brightness highlights. So I usually like to keep the moon bright but not too bright. So I increase the light a bit and I decrease the highlights so it doesn't disturb the eye. Same with the darks. I reduce them a bit just to create more contrast and more shadows. This is color grading, but what it really does, it gives like a pop to the image. So there's three things. There's midtone, shadows, and highlight. If you look at the top here, most of my image is on this area, which is the shadow area, dark. So you might want to work more on the shadow, and then reduce a bit the contrast on this. All right, this is a last step, and then we are done. So masking, basically, this is sharpening the image. Thing in white is being selected. So I want to exclude the sky. So I'll move it until the sky is excluded. And that's how I know all the sharpening is being applied to the building. You can now increase a bit the sharpening if you want to make it more sharp. All right. Now I can see the images after doing some tweaks, it's still a bit not too sharp. So to increase the contrast, we can decrease a bit the blacks. That will increase the contrast of the white to the blacks. Okay. And the final step is to crop it. If you're using it for Instagram, you want to go 4:5. I like to zoom in on the moon, so I usually go all the way like this. All right. Now, with the help of some more tools, like for example, if I want to make the moon more sharp, then there is here some masking tools. And select the brush. And then there's clarity and texture section with a bit of dehaze. And I can just work on the moon separately. So it will create that contrasty look of the moon. Just very minor edits on this. If I feel like I want to show more of the crater, luckily this was during sunset, so even though the moon was so high, I could still see details on the moon. So let's go into first brightening it up. I will go a bit faster if you don't mind, so don't fall asleep. but it's almost the same process that I used earlier. So here I'm reducing the highlights of the moon, so I can get the details on the moon, increasing a bit the shadows, increasing a bit the whites. And here I really want to add a bit more clarity and a bit more. It was a very hazy day that day. A bit of dehaze, up to 10, I would say. I really want to pop the colors on this because it was a sunset. So even I can play with the temperature here a little bit to get that sunset feel. And here you can see how if I decrease the light, the whole image will die. So you really want to keep the light up and reduce the darks to create the contrast with it. Now, one more thing that I didn't cover, I will just go to it in a bit. I will go to some color adjustments. So maybe work on specific colors. I'll go to it in a second. Let's just do this. So here you have something called HSL. So here you're targeting specific colors. So you have red, orange, yellow, green, and up to magenta. So looking at the image, you want to understand what colors are prominent and which ones you want to do so this doesn't show. Okay. I would like to increase, for example, the reds. So I will do that. If I do more, you'll start seeing the lines. So you don't want to do it too much again. Maybe 15. The same for the luminance. That will give a bit of pop to the image. Do some color grading. No. Where is it? So this is the before and the after. This is the one that I edited. So I maybe increased a bit more the colors on it. And then I took it also in Photoshop just to do some minor adjustments. And this is the final image that I got. I'm not going to go into Photoshop because it's much more advanced course. But you can do a lot with just Lightroom. I can go through one more image if you want, if you have any questions in between. Stacking. So for the moon, you could, but what happens is because the moon is moving, when you come to put them together, it will always have edges that are not matching. So you will have like a ring around the moon from the bottom where it's moving, and it doesn't stitch correctly. Now the rest of the image will. So if you do HDR and you do AEL, let's say -2 exposures, you come and stack it, you will get the majority of the image will be great and you can work on it, but the moon itself will not look good. So in that case, what you will have to do is take the moon, go to Photoshop, add the moon, then you're ruining your image somehow. But if you prefer to do that, it's your choice as a photographer. At the end, the image is an art form, so you decide what you want to show as an artist. I'm using in camera, allow me to recover everything I want. Okay.
Usually, how many shots you take with the best one?
So for instance, this one was 2 or 3 shots. Okay, and I check it, I make sure it's sharp after I take it. Whereas this one as well, sorry, this one was a complete time lapse. So from when the moon was down until when it passed it. So it's around 700 to 800 shots. And that allows me to do a video and post. So I can put something on social media like a reel or something like that. And I can choose in between. Like yesterday, I did something similar, and I got a helicopter in my shot in the moon. And I was like, okay, this was worth it, like if you're lucky.
I mean, can you take an image where the moon is very big in size? How do you manage to get that shot?
Very big?
Yeah.
I mean, this is shot at 600, and that's how big it is. To go too big, I've shot in 1200. I don't have the photo here to process. But it's almost the same process. I can show you on this one how I will process the moon.
No, he's just asking me how you have taken that close.
How to get that close up? I'll add a 2x teleconverter. That's it.
Is there
But-
a teleconverter available for this Sigma then?
Uh,
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. 2 times teleconverter. Will it work with?
it's one situation where I had to push the camera dynamic range to the extreme limit. So I went almost to the point where I cannot overexpose it more than this. Otherwise, I will lose the details on the moon. And I knew that I can recover the details on the Burj Khalifa. You will see how this one will turn out. So first of all, I will go up on the exposure because I went at least two stops on this one, at least. And then I will go down on the highlight. So usually what I do is, in this case, it's still too dark. So I'll go down up to 90. And then I'll keep going up until the moon is okay. That will be my starting point. That's extreme, visible. So I'll go up to recover the black. The clarity is dead, so I'll increase it, but significantly. Also the texture. And because it's a bit hazy, we'll dehaze it a little bit. Here, that's the beauty of a raw file, that you can change the color in post. Not too much, but okay. Then here we can still work a bit on the highlights, increase the light, darks. You see how much noise we have in this shot? Because we are working on very extreme kind of scenario. So in this specific shot, I will go to let's do a bit more contrast on this by working on the color grading. This does magic sometimes. You can see how it went from this to this. And work on the shadows. And we tweak the highlights on the moon. All right, so because of, it's more than enough, the resolution. Here we go. I can see also that it's not perfectly straight. I don't know if you noticed that. So for that, we can adjust the angle. A better way to do it, if you don't want to adjust the angle, you see I didn't do it properly here. So a better way to do it, there are some guides in the bottom. And you can select, and let me select it again. One second. Oh, it's not working on this one. It works better when you have multiple buildings and very distorted wide angles. So I'm not going to use this method for now. Let's delete it. So we'll go to the manual methods of adjusting. All right, I think it's good now. Here's my final image. And with some Photoshop adjustments, I was able to get this, maybe more blue. I changed a bit the tones. I got a bit more details on the, I used the software to remove the noise, which is called denoise, Topaz denoise. It's very good. So even an image like this, if you do the right processing, you can recover it. Any questions? No? Done? Yes.
What's about pointing just to the moon and trying to get some images to stack them?
Hmm.
Do you think even in that case, stacking will not work that good? To get more details, more sharp image?
Yeah. Of course, in that case, when it's only the moon, you can stack them and you can get much more details of the moon. And there are software specifically for that specific situation to stack the images. So it will help you stack them. You can just press the burst and you take 50 images, put them on that software. It will align them, sharpen the moon for you.
Decrease the shutter from
Okay.
what I want.
Yeah. So
I'm asking if you have any recommendation on time lapsing, specifically when it's rising.
yeah. So if it's day to night, if it's a moon sunset, it's a bit more complex, of course. If the light is not changing much, it's already dark and the moon is rising, then I recommend use manual mode. Okay, and because it's not gonna change much, you just have to underexpose your image by 1.5, 1.7 stops. So the moon, as it goes up, it gets brighter. So in the beginning, it will look good. 5 minutes later, it will look like a sun. So you want to underexpose it from the beginning. I do most of my shots during sunset or just after sunset, blue hour. In that case, I use aperture priority. What that allows me to do, it does vary the shutter, but there is an option in the camera that says once you reach a certain shutter that I will set, 1/15th of a second, then start increasing your ISO. And that is much better to work with. Mm.
You choose a location from the photos we planned it, we went there.
Yeah.
But it was, even I calibrate the app, but we set the camera for the time lapse, but the moon comes out.
In a different location. Okay.
Just a little bit of
Little bit far. So this is what I shot yesterday. But let's say you want to shoot Burj Khalifa, let's make an easy subject. So first of all, when you select this, you know how to put the black pen? How you figure it out? First you need to
that's what I was saying. That
all right.
I was saying my friend, I don't have that jack.
So if you go, you see this menu here, you can slide it. If I remove it, then you introduce it. Then you can move it. Okay? So for me, I'm gonna move it to the base of Burj Khalifa, not the top. The top is a wrong image. You go to the base. All right? So that is your subject. Now, if you've used photo pills, you know that the blue line is the moon position. That's when it's gonna rise. And the dark blue is when it's gonna set, the angle. So right now, you are not going to be able to catch Burj Khalifa. Let's go up to, it's close. So now it's close to it. Okay? Then if you slide here, sorry, I think the second menu here, there's something called object height. See it? So you, and it will reach here 196 meters, and it will touch Burj Khalifa. 196 meters is low compared to 850. So you might want to relocate yourself a bit further, like this. And then here you will get up to 500. I usually shoot it around 700. So I'll keep moving my pin until I get around 700 meters. 650 is fine. Okay. Now if you read down, it says at 8:50 p.m. So in 1 minute, you can capture it. If you go now and rush over there and set up the tripod, you have 1 minute to go there. All right. Is it clear? Or it gives you also the size of the moon, so 30 meters. If you know, let's say, the width of Burj, you will know how big it will look. I can tell you at 3.4 kilometers will look small. It will be almost similar to what I showed you. But actually smaller than the last picture I was editing. Okay, the other thing you need to do here, so this is the app, huh? But I don't know if you can shoot from there. You have to check what beach is this and can you access, I think you can access that beach, yeah. Now, the same thing, if I just move 1 day, just to give you an example. So I go to tomorrow, 8. I want to change the date. So what happened here? The moon moved slightly. We have to adjust your position slightly for tomorrow, okay? If you go to that beach, once you are there, you can click that pin, it will locate you, and it will give you a and then doing it in prints and stuff. Now, social media, unfortunately, is not something fair for everyone, and the AI is going to. I mean, you've seen what's happening on Instagram for the last several years. A lot of people will Photoshop before even AI was there. That is people's choice. Of course, it creates the perception now for whoever's scrolling that this is fake, which is bad for artists, bad for everyone. That we cannot fix. It's something that we have to live with. I hope that one day they will create programs, because I saw one image on Instagram recently. It was, you know how they put like kind of black screen and they say fake? Have you seen it? So they started introducing these kind of things that, okay, this is manipulated or fake image. And I saw in other places where you have to declare, I think they're trying to launch a law in France, where you have to declare when you're using filters or any things that are not real. So if it becomes by law, then things become clearer for people, and it will give the photographers the right and the artists the right that they deserve. Yeah. But AI is something we will have to live with, whether we like it or not. It's there. It's technology. Yeah. Yeah. All right. If no further questions, I think yeah. It's depending on the changes in light of the image. If it started at dark and it ended at dark and it's almost the same, then I do copy paste, and then I do minor adjustments in Lightroom. So I do steps. The best way to do it is to use some very specific softwares. LR time lapse that can fix this transition from, let's say, day to night. It will help you do it in a better way and a much smoother way. In most images, I don't use LR. For moon, I don't use usually LR unless it's really extreme. if there's a huge variation, like completely day to completely night, then I'll find myself going there because there is no other quick way to do it. Welcome. Any other questions, wishes? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Superb. Thank you very much, Rami. And it was a bit intense, right? So we'll do one thing later after Ramadan. Let us do a proper workshop.
Okay.
Yeah. So like we outdoor one. Yeah. So we may do something like with Sigma. All the ranges of Sigma lenses lined up together. Yeah. And thanks everyone for coming. And how many of you didn't follow iBrandConnect so far? Please follow iBrandConnect.
How many didn't follow
Rami.
Extra Rami?
Sigma. Yeah. Okay. So those who are with car, please take one of these. Please. Please come forward. Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Amazing, yeah. And thanks Sigma, thanks MK
How are you?
for all the support, Ravi
I
and the
didn't see
team.
you in the beginning.
Yeah, please come join. Yeah. Yes.
How are you?
Yeah, S1. Go S1 and give it to the security. They'll activate it for you. Yeah.
I think we have to be.
Yeah, two lines. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, parking. Yeah. Two line. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Please come. Come. Yeah, some of them can sit here also. Yeah.
Ravi, come.
Hey, have a seat. Yeah.
You're part of the toll crew. You can
Yeah.
sit in the
Come. Have a seat. Yeah. Get. No, it's okay. Please. Okay. Yeah, here also. Stand here. Down. Yeah. Come down.